The US space agency NASA has released new footage showing a series of powerful solar flares. There have been more than half a dozen such eruptions on the surface of the sun in the last week.
A huge explosion of radioactive material. Over the last few days, there have been more than half a dozen similar eruptions.
The effusive lava eruption that began early on Sunday near Iceland's Bardarbunga volcano was still spouting lava on Monday. Now, this eruption briefly caused the country to raise its ash alert level for aviation to its highest level.
And now to the latest in an Ebola outbreak that can't seem to be contained. Today, World Health officials said the virus keeps on spreading. The number of people infected with Ebola keeps growing, with the number now at 3,500. An additional 1,900 more have died. The World Health Organization estimated that the outbreak now includes Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Nigeria, and Senegal.
This is really the first epidemic of Ebola the world has ever known. It's spreading widely. Bad as the situation is now, everything I've seen suggests that over the next few weeks it's likely to get worse. This is not just a problem for West Africa, it's not just a problem for Africa, it's a problem for the world.
We face new and evolving dangers. To the east, Russia is ripping up the rulebook with its annexation of Crimea and its troops on sovereign soil in Ukraine. To the south, an arc of instability bends from North Africa to the Middle East. Last night we discussed the threat posed by ISIL in Iraq and Syria. So our message is clear. We are united in condemnation of these barbaric and despicable acts. They should be very clear, these terrorists. Their threats will only harden our resolve to stand up for our values and to defeat them.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
We are united.
I call on my friends, family, and loved ones to rise up against my real killers, the U.S. government. But what will happen to me is only a result of their complacency and criminality.
This is James Wright Foley, an American citizen of your country. As a government, you have been at the forefront of the aggression towards the Islamic State, so any attempt by you, Obama, to deny the Muslims their rights of living in safety under the Islamic Caliphate will result in the bloodshed of your people.
A disturbing development in the past few hours. The Islamic State's released a video depicting the second beheading of what it's claimed to be the American journalist Steven Sotloff. The jihadist group had earlier threatened to carry out such a killing if America continued its airstrikes.
I am Steven Joel Sotloff. I'm sure you know exactly who I am by now and why I am appearing before you. And now, it is time for my message. Obama, your foreign policy of intervention in Iraq was supposed to be for the preservation of American lives and interests. So why is it that I'm having to pay the price of your interference with my life? Am I not an American citizen?
I'm back, Obama, and I'm back because of your arrogant foreign policy towards the Islamic State, because of your insistence in continuing your bombings in Al-Malli, Zumar and the Mosul Dam, despite our serious warnings. You, Obama, have yet again, through your actions, killed yet another American citizen. So just as your missiles continue to strike our people, our knife will continue to strike the necks of your people.
A man has escaped from an Ebola quarantine centre, sending people fleeing in fear as he walked through a local market in search of food. On Monday, the patient, who can be seen in a red shirt and wearing a tag showing that he'd tested positive for Ebola, tried to get away from doctors in the centre in Monrovia, Liberia.
And the UN says the Ebola death toll has now reached more than 2,000 people and several thousands more infected.
The director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the Ebola epidemic is spreading wildly.
When these barbarians replicated with Stephen what they did with Foley, they somehow think that it's going to lessen U.S. resolve, frighten us, intimidate us. As a nation, we're united. And when people harm Americans, we don't retreat. We don't forget. We take care of those who are grieving. And when that's finished, they should know we will follow them to the gates of hell until they are brought to justice. Because hell is where they will reside. Hell is where they will reside.
We learned something very interesting about the Siri voice app. It comes with every iPhone. I'm going to give it a date and check out what happens. What is July 27th, 2014?
It's Sunday, July 27th, 2014, opening gates of Hades.
Opening gates of Hades.
The gates of hell are open and the hellhounds are loose, and that's ISIS.
The deadly Ebola virus. Dr. Besser has witnessed all manner of medical emergencies, but this one he is calling, quote, the gates of hell.
We will follow them to the gates of hell.
Opening gates of Hades.
A woman has been found dead in the garden of a house in Edmonton in North London. We've had reports that she has apparently been found beheaded in a back garden.
This woman was beheaded. Reports of a man armed with a knife. These sort of events on our streets during the day in residential areas are very, very unusual and are not common.
We face new and evolving dangers.
The threat of ISIS promising to come attack America on U.S. soil.
Australia's terror alert level has been lifted to high.
Britain's Prime Minister has warned a terror attack is highly likely and has upgraded the country's threat risk level to severe.
Turkey appears to have woken up to the threat.
Ukraine and Russia, civil war in Syria, the threat of a brutal so-called caliphate across the Middle East. It seems like the world we're living in is slipping out of control. Fighting in Ukraine's eastern region continues. Russia denies involvement, but the situation has plunged Europe into its worst diplomatic crisis since the Cold War. Violence in Gaza and parts of Israel this summer left more than 2,000 Palestinians and 69 Israelis dead. The rapid rise of Islamic State has sparked fear and outrage across the world. This extremist group has beheaded and crucified prisoners and declared a caliphate in Iraq and Syria. Since the overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi, militia groups are Libya's biggest security threat as successive governments have struggled to exercise control. Al-Qaeda's leader announced the creation of Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent and continued loyalty to the Taliban in Afghanistan. Southeast Asia has been the base of radical Islamist groups, particularly those in the Philippines and Indonesia. Insurgents have been active in Africa too, with Nigeria the focal point of an offensive by Boko Haram. Its attacks, assassinations and abductions have led to the deaths of thousands. Violence continues in South Sudan and the Central African Republic. With events like these shaping our world and millions of people fleeing the conflicts, who holds the power? How do you operate in a world where diplomacy is off the table and sanctions don't appear to apply anymore?
Breaking news just in. An ISIS video released today appears to show the terrorist group has executed another hostage, British aid worker David Haynes.
My name is David Cawthorne Haynes. I would like to declare that I hold you, David Cameron, entirely responsible for my execution. You entered voluntarily into a coalition with the United States against the Islamic State, just as your predecessor, Tony Blair, did, following a trend amongst our British Prime Ministers who can't find the courage to say no to the Americans. Unfortunately, it is we, the British public, that in the end will pay the price for our Parliament's selfish decisions.
This British man has to pay the price for your promise, Cameron, to arm the Peshmerga against the Islamic State. Ironically, he has spent a decade of his life serving under the same Royal Air Force that is responsible for delivering those arms. Your evil alliance with America, which continues to strike the Muslims of Iraq and most recently bombed the Haditha Dam, will only accelerate your destruction. And playing the role of the obedient lapdog, Cameron, will only drag you and your people into another bloody and unwinnable war.
Usually this time of year, this public space in central Tokyo is full of people. Right now, it's deserted as Japan tackles its first reported domestic outbreak of dengue fever since the end of World War II, 1945, almost 70 years ago.
This is a disease that people here thought was gone forever. This is the middle of one of the biggest cities in the world. It's not a place you expect to be bitten by a mosquito and potentially get a fatal disease.
Japan, that's battling the first cases of dengue fever in almost 70 years. We're hearing that 19 more people were confirmed as infected, bringing the total to 22 now.
These are the first known domestic cases of the mosquito-borne disease to hit the country since World War II.
This outbreak of a severe respiratory virus, sending at least 1,000 kids to the hospital, that is now spread to at least a dozen states, and the CDC is warning that doctors are now seeing what could be just the tip of the iceberg.
A mysterious virus striking children by the hundreds is spreading across the country.
A lot of kids have been on the verge of respiratory failure. So I've been an ICU physician for 15 years, and I've never seen this before.
At least 1,000 children in these 10 states stricken with a respiratory illness over the past 3 weeks. The CDC believes it's the potentially fatal enterovirus 68.
To go from a cold to being probably minutes away from death, that's kind of scary.
Health officials in the Midwest throwing around the U word, calling this unprecedented.
It's in 10 states now. It's going to spread across the country.
The death toll from the worst Ebola outbreak in history has jumped by almost 200 in one day.
As the Ebola epidemic continues to grow across West Africa, the World Health Organization has come forward to admit the virus is out of control and efforts to contain it are failing.
The WHO says the death toll has now risen to more than 2,400 people out of almost 4,800 cases.
The number of new cases is moving far faster than the capacity to manage them. Today, there is not one single bed available for the treatment of an Ebola patient in the entire country of Liberia. In fact, the outbreak is so bad in Liberia, the New York Times did a piece called "Dying of Ebola at the Hospital Door."
This is a global threat. Ebola is now an epidemic of the likes that we have not seen before. It's spiraling out of control. It is getting worse. It's spreading faster and exponentially. People are literally dying in the streets. Today, thousands of people in West Africa are infected. That number could rapidly grow to tens of thousands. And if the outbreak is not stopped now, we could be looking at hundreds of thousands of people infected, with profound political and economic and security implications for all of us. This is a global threat.
Now a health alert impacting our children. The Entero D68 virus spreading rapidly throughout the country. It's now on the East Coast, sending kids to the hospital. All told, it is confirmed or suspected in 21 states. It is confirmed or suspected in 21 states.
From today, we can no longer think the war on terror happens somewhere else. It's here, in our city, in our suburbs. The plan was frightening. Kidnap someone at random in Martin Place, behead them, and then drape their body with the Islamic State flag and post the video on social media. So this morning across 12 Sydney suburbs, we had the biggest security raids in the nation's history. 800 federal and state police targeted properties before dawn. There were 15 arrests and there have been interrogations all day.
Last week, Australia's terror alert was upgraded from medium to high. This morning, Australia's largest counter-terrorism operation hit 25 targets across 12 Sydney suburbs, from Beecroft to Bass Hill, Marsfields to Marylands. Cars were checked, cash seized, yards were dug up. At Marsfield, police recovered a sword with an inscription in Arabic, ominous in the context of police allegations against this man. 22-year-old Omarjan Azari is accused of plotting a public beheading, what would be the first terrorist attack on the lucky country he calls home. The alleged attack, intended for Martin Place, was to kill a random person, drape them in the Islamic State flag, film it, and upload the pictures to social media.
The violence was to be perpetrated on a member of the public on the streets
and certainly at this stage was at a very high level.
The attack would be designed to shock, the same way in which British soldier Lee Rigby was murdered in front of horrified witnesses in the UK last year.
A Malaysian passenger plane has been shot down. The plane was flying at an altitude of approximately 33,000 feet when it was hit by a missile.
An eerie sight this morning, flying high above the Brooklyn Bridge. 2 white flags in place of the American flags typically hoisted above these iconic towers. The ability to pull off a stunt on this scale is as troubling as it is mysterious. At 3:30 this morning, the waving American flag suddenly disappears. At 3:30 this morning, the waving American flag suddenly disappears.
Ukraine and Russia. Civil war in Syria, the threat of a brutal so-called caliphate across the Middle East. It seems like the world we're living in is slipping out of control.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
We are united. The alleged attack, intended for Martin Place, was to kill a random person, drape them in the Islamic State flag, film it, and upload the pictures to social media. The alleged attack, intended for Martin Place, was to kill a random person, drape them in the Islamic State flag, film it, and upload the pictures to social media.
Oh, this is beyond anything that we've seen, so we must prepare for everything and get ready. They're beyond just a terrorist group.
This is an organization that has an apocalyptic end-of-days strategic vision.
From today, we can no longer think the war on terror happens somewhere else. It's here, in our city, in our suburbs.
The US Space Agency, NASA, has released new footage showing a series of powerful solar flares. There have been more than half a dozen such eruptions on the surface of the sun in the last week.
A huge explosion of radioactive material. Over the last few days, there have been more than half a dozen similar eruptions.
Now, an asteroid named Pitbull will whiz past planet Earth.
It is, on the cosmic scale, coming fairly close to us.
From the Earth's surface, the asteroid will fly by us 25,000 miles away, 10 times closer than the moon, catapulting at a speed of 40,000 miles an hour.
Nicaraguan officials say they feel lucky no one was hurt from the possible meteorite that touched down over the weekend. Local outlets report citizens in the capital city of Managua first heard a loud boom Saturday night, and government officials announced they'd located a crater and believed a meteorite was responsible. It struck the Earth around 670 miles per hour.
The impact left behind a crater, even registered on the seismic instruments which measure earthquakes.
Over Labor Day weekend, NASA says it detected a 60-foot-long asteroid named 2014 RC. The NEO, or Near-Earth Object, grabbed headlines because of its relatively close pass by Earth.
Yesterday in Spain at 6:55, meteor lit up the skies of several places.
1:48 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, a solar flare-up on the sun launched a powerful burst of radiation at the daylight side of our planet. Immediate disruptions to high-frequency radio communications lasted for a little more than an hour. One way it can affect us on the ground is by disrupting the power grid or communication satellites.
This is the second solar flare this week, but this one's a bit more of a concern because it's aimed right at us.
6 a.m. Novato. It was just before sunrise.
I looked up at the sky and saw this little orange ball above the redwood trees. All of a sudden, these lights came down from that little orange ball. Couldn't tell you what it was.
Scientists are still trying to figure that out too. The California Academy of Sciences says it's possible it was a meteor.
It's rather unusual in that this one appears to have a very broad tail following behind it.
It was spotted in 3 states, Nevada, California, and Oregon.
Last night, a meteor skipped along the Earth's atmosphere, lighting up the sky from New Jersey to Ohio. More than 190 reports have poured into the American Meteor Society.
We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and the last generation that can do something about it. We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and the last generation that can do something about it.
Locals are calling it the Lake of Death as they scoop up an estimated 156 tons of dead freshwater popoche chub. Around 40 million of them popped to the surface last week, not to eat or to jump, but as dead fish.
Boat after boat pulls into shore, all with the same sad, stinking cargo.
At least 10 people have died and 30 others are still missing after heavy rainfall triggered landslides in southwest China. More than 300 millimeters of rainfall in less than 24 hours has caused flash floods and landslides in multiple towns.
The astonishingly heavy rainfall in the region, causing almost 5,000 houses to collapse, 1.9 million people who have been affected.
A warning went out today in Hawaii. Flowing lava from the Kilauea volcano is now less than a mile from a community on the Big Island. A new vent opened up recently, sending lava toward the homes.
Kilauea spills lava in all directions, but instead of traveling down the slope and into the ocean in the past, the lava is moving to the east towards communities.
Lava continues to creep closer to homes.
Lava continues to emerge from Iceland's Bardabung volcano. Scientists are concerned that if the eruption spreads to an ice cap 4 kilometers away, the subsequent explosion could generate ash clouds.
Hundreds of people have died and thousands more left homeless in severe flooding during monsoon rains in India and Pakistan. Large areas of Srinagar, the largest city in Indian-controlled Kashmir, are still submerged. Some places, the water submerged entire homes.
One of the wettest days on record. More than 240 millimeters of rain happened in the last 24 hours. Your monthly average is about 98 millimeters for the entire month of September. So you had almost 1.5 times what you would normally get the entire month in just a matter of hours.
Well, another volcano in Iceland, this one with an unusual problem. The Holoren volcano is spewing something other than lava. It's spewing toxic gas. It's life-threatening near the eruption. And the smell, much like rotting food, is being detected as far away as Finland.
Torrential rain in the Balkans has caused fresh flooding. Here in Croatia, around 2,000 people needed to be evacuated. Surging river waters rose at the rate of 10 centimeters an hour. Slovenia was also hit in eastern and south-central regions.
Hurricane Odile brought fierce winds and rain as it battered Mexico's northwest coast Monday, proving challenging for those who ventured outside. Trees were uprooted in La Paz. Power lines came crashing down. It's deemed one of the worst storms to hit the luxury retreat of Los Cabos.
The typhoon in southern China, Kalmigi, the 15th typhoon to strike China this year, landed on Tuesday morning, forcing more than 350,000 local people to flee their homes, bringing heavy rainfall and high waves.
In California tonight, there are now at least 13 separate major fires burning under what's being called unprecedented fire conditions. Record heat, extreme drought.
With this drought lasting 3 years now, this could be the most destructive wildfire season on record.
Unprecedented.
They're burning at explosive rates.
In the town of Weed, 150 structures went up in minutes.
The American Southwest, and that would include what we call the desert Southwest, is bracing for as much as 6 months' worth of rain to fall in just a matter of days.
People have been killed after heavy tropical rains caused widespread flooding in the Philippines. Forecasters said nearly a month's worth of rain fell overnight as people slept. Tens of thousands of people in the capital Manila have been displaced and thousands have fled. Tropical storm Feng Wong came with winds of up to 100 kilometers per hour. Last week, Typhoon Kalmegi hit the same area, killing 8 people and displacing more than 300,000. The Italian city of Florence has been hit by a violent hailstorm, which destroyed terrace bars in a central square and injured 5 people when a primary school collapsed in an outlying village. Other outlying areas were struck by a whirlwind.
We
are just getting reports of an earthquake in Alaska this hour.
About a half hour ago, 6.2 magnitude earthquake. This is about 80 miles northwest of Anchorage.
Smoke and ash were flung hundreds of meters into the sky after Mount Ontake suddenly erupted on Saturday. At least 30 hikers are feared dead. Others were injured or are missing. Volcanic rocks fell like hailstones.
Now, this volcano, which is located rather close to Tokyo, erupted completely without warning.
The death toll from Japan's worst volcanic eruption in decades is likely to rise to more than 45. Military searchers have been bringing down more bodies.
At least 8 people have been killed by a 5.1 magnitude earthquake that has hit rural southern Peru. The quake occurred in a remote area. Emergency authorities are continuing to search for victims.
6 people died when the car they were traveling in plunged into this 26-foot wide sinkhole on an unlit section of highway linking the Crimean capital Simferopol and the village of Nikolaevka. Among the dead are 3-year-old twins. Rescuers say the giant pit, which is at least 19 feet deep, would have suddenly appeared in the middle of the road in front of the car as the collapsing earth had damaged power lines, making it impossible to have seen the killer hole in time to avoid it.
Heavy rains have caused widespread flooding in southern France. In the space of 6 hours, the city was pounded with around half of its average annual rainfall. Météo France, the national weather agency, issued a rare red alert. This man watched as his home was badly damaged. "I'm 93 years old and I've never seen anything like it," he said. The water was flowing over. I saw a wall topple and at the same time everywhere filled with water. It arrived almost out of nowhere.
It took just minutes for this afternoon's downpour to swamp Melbourne.
It recorded close to 40 mils in the past couple of hours. Then, just a short time ago, large hailstones started pelting the Belgrave, Ringwood and Heidelberg areas.
It's a staple of the science fiction world, telepathy. Movies like X-Men explore the mind-bending possibility of communicating instantaneously without uttering a single word, simply by thinking it.
Well, an international group of scientists say they've done just that. They've managed to use internet technology to send a telepathic message direct from one brain to another 5,000 miles away.
The co-author of the research says this is just the beginning.
I think that if we are successful with this technological development and we continue, we will eventually be able to unite telepathically people across the globe and enrich the information exchange between human beings and machines. And if I had to say a time scale, I would give it a 50-year time scale to see something practical.
The world of neuroscience is opening the doors to telepathic communication.
And Homo sapien 2.0, according to a researcher at the Global Brain Institute, a completely new human species will inhabit the Earth in just over 30 years. What kind of people will we become? Well, they say our biological clocks will undergo dramatic changes, which will allow us to live longer and give birth at an older age. And of course, technology, machines and cyborgs, all kinds of microchip implants will be placed in our ears and our fingers and make many devices completely obsolete.
We are going to become gods. Period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate. And if you're going to interfere with me becoming God, you're going to have big trouble. Then we'll have warfare. You kill me, I'll kill you.
All kinds of microchip implants will be placed in our ears and our fingers.
Well, how about a brain chip implant? What they're developing is implantable closed-loop systems able to deliver targeted neural stimulation. This is all part of President Obama's Brain Initiative. DARPA is working on creating a memory-enhancing microchip that would be implanted directly into your brain. Sounds pretty creepy.
You kill me, I'll kill you.
Tremendous advancements have been made in the field of neuroscience, from mapping the human brain to creating devices that can capture digital images of our thoughts. But what if we could upload a digital copy of our memories and consciousness to a point that human beings could actually achieve a sort of digital immortality?
This will replace the internet. It'll become a brain net. We'll record emotions, thoughts, patterns, behavior, and send it on the internet. we're going to be able to record thoughts.
Taking your consciousness and uploading it digitally.
The ability to have access to powers of the mind that we cannot as mortals.
We are going to become gods.
Right now, the time that we're living in is the golden age for learning about the mind, that we've learned more in the last 15 years than in all of prior human history. Why? What took so long?
Because only recently have we had the physics.
Where one man's mind is uploaded into a supercomputer which possesses the collective knowledge of all of humanity. The concept behind it is very real.
Wallahi, the fighting has just begun.
A masked ISIS militant and his comrades ready their guns and appear to execute the Syrians who dug their own graves.
In a message posted online by an ISIS spokesman, the most dire threat yet against the U.S. and its allies. Quote, if you can kill a disbelieving American or European, especially the spiteful and filthy French, or an Australian or a Canadian, or any other disbeliever, then rely upon Allah and kill him in any manner or way, however it may be.
Wallahi, the fighting has just begun.
Word came out of Oklahoma today, of all places, that there had been a beheading there.
Police say a man, Alton Nolan, who had just been fired from an Oklahoma food processing plant, went into a rage and began attacking his co-workers. Nolan allegedly stabbed one woman repeatedly and then, according to police, severed her head. Police say he then began stabbing a second woman before being shot and subdued. Police say Nolan recently tried to convert some of his co-workers to Islam. Sources say a variety of religious materials were recovered from his car. Now, with almost daily threats from ISIS and al-Qaeda, U.S. officials are on high guard for possible homeland attacks.
The pictures are simply incredible coming out of one of the world's major financial centers. In the streets, a sea of umbrellas, the symbol of a mass demonstration underway in Hong Kong. Tonight, the United States is urging police in Hong Kong, which is home to some 60,000 American citizens, to show some restraint.
Police in a small town in New Mexico are catching more than just criminals. They're catching images of what they believe are ghosts on surveillance cameras. It was a typical Saturday night at the police station when an officer keeping an eye on surveillance cameras spotted something in the Sally Port. The camera captured this image in a secured area where there's no way in and no way out without an open gate and alarm sounding.
At first, I thought it was like a polilla, like a fly, a moth, and then I saw the legs and it was a human.
See it walk through, it walks in the direction of the old transport cages, and there's not really any way for it to get out through there, but it seems to walk right through that. A lot of our officers have seen certain things. Some of our officers have felt what appears to be somebody breathing down their neck as they're working on reports in the briefing room.
Detectives say there's no logical explanation for this, not an issue with the lighting or a technical glitch. Turns out there are a lot of ghost stories around here.
Another virus that is spreading, chikungunya. 500,000 people are ill with the mosquito-borne virus in the Dominican Republic.
Chikungunya got its name from the word in Mozambique that describes the intense joint pain caused by the virus.
Once infected, the pain could last up to 6 months.
There's no current cure for the virus.
Now the Ebola virus has quickly turned into one of the worst epidemics in modern times and is spreading fast, claiming more and more lives by the day.
The total cases in West Africa have reached an estimated 5,800 illnesses and over 2,800 deaths.
The World Health Organization called today, quote, unparalleled in modern times.
In the villages, the grave diggers can't keep up with the number of bodies. Perlina is 3 years old. Her mother died in the ambulance on the way to the nearest clinic. Perlina never got to kiss her mother goodbye, as Ebola is highly infectious in its last stages, and any touch can be fatal. Now orphaned and alone, Perlina has to be quarantined for at least 3 weeks to find out if she too has the deadly virus that's killed her entire family.
With Ebola now spiraling beyond a health crisis and into a global security threat,
the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has a grim outlook on the Ebola outbreak sweeping West Africa. It says without further intervention, the number of cases in Liberia and Sierra Leone could reach 1.4 million by January.
The virus is spreading much faster than efforts to contain it. Some experts predict that if we don't get control of the virus, the number of infections could mushroom to nearly 55,000 by next month.
Clearly, there is no end in sight to this epidemic, as it seems the UN cannot control the outbreak until the end of this year. It will take at least 6 to 9 more months to curb the influx of infections and fatalities that have crippled West Africa.
That is unprecedented, and I can't remember a time when we sent troops to do this particular mission.
An impending food crisis looms over West Africa due to a state of emergency lockdowns blocking access to aid in the efforts to contain the spread of the outbreak.
And the New York Times says the outbreak of a respiratory illness among children is growing. 38 states are now affected. There are 226 confirmed cases of enterovirus D68, but it's likely many more people have been infected.
The World Health Organization has announced that the death toll in West Africa's Ebola epidemic has now exceeded 3,000. The death toll has now exceeded 3,000.
Outbreak in Africa, and tonight the first confirmed case here in America. The patient diagnosed here in the U.S. Tonight, a team from the CDC rushing to the scene, to this hospital in Dallas, where he is in isolation showing symptoms. It's believed he's been infectious for several days after returning from West Africa. This evening, the test results confirming it is Ebola. Tonight, word President Obama has been briefed, and now the all-out push to track down anyone who may have been in contact with him.
The CDC is confirming late today what doctors in this Dallas hospital fear, that the patient who walked into their emergency room Sunday with high fever and other symptoms is sick with Ebola, the first case diagnosed in this country.